Welcome to another episode of Soulstenance. In this episode, Joe and I get into some pretty cool topics. So we deviate in some ways and go full into anti-aging. So we talk about NAD+, we talk about Senolytics, we talk about the foundation of what one should do for mental, emotional, physical, and therefore potentially spiritual health, of before we start seeking all these things to feel better or to improve our lives, like why are we doing it and how important blood work plays a role in that. And so from there we go into anti-aging, a lot of different things. I share a bit more about my journey and some of the stuff I'm doing, and Joe brings up some great points about really honoring the discipline and honoring why we're doing it instead of just chasing the end result. And I touch on falling in love with the process and not the end result as well. So we talk about that. So it's a great episode. I think it's really cool because it's a little bit different in several ways from our average episode. And without further ado, we'll let you dive right in. Yeah, there's a plethora, man. It's really interesting. So because of my journey and the impact that's had on my hair thinning being one of them, but a lot of things, is I've researched more and more, I think in the last year and a half especially. And I didn't even know the term. Have you heard of Senolytics?
I don't know that I have.
Yeah, I never heard of that. And it's from I forget the word that it comes from, but I was watching a podcast last night. It was Andrew Huberman, which that name's getting so trendy now, but and another scientist researcher. It was so cool because I've learned so many things over the last, for years, but especially in the last year and a half, 2 years, including Tony Robbins' book, Life Force, and just so many other sources. And Senolytics are literally things that are anti-aging.
Okay.
And so, have you heard of telomeres?
That sounds familiar.
That was pretty trendy, I think 5 or 10 years ago. So telomeres, it's I think it's part of our DNA. I wouldn't quote me on this. Or maybe it's with our chromosomes. I forget which part, but it's kind of like the end of a shoelace, and how it has that plastic thing on it. And telomeres are tied to aging, where as we age, they start to fray, and it causes aging. And so things that can keep the telomeres intact are very good. And so this physically, mentally, hormonally, emotionally, in our brain, it's all connected. And so some of the big terms I've learned are, telomeres, Senolytics, and what we can do, supplements we can take, activities we can do, habits we can implement, and with food and all that to really slow our aging. And it's fascinated me, especially with my health journey and turning 39 last month. And and so I think one of the cool things, so I'm actually starting this week, and I haven't told you this, is another trendy thing, is nicotinamide adenosine dinucleotide, NAD+. So
tiny little name.
Yeah. So summarized NAD+. And so all the IV clinics have this. I did this last year in Texas. And it's a really funky feeling when you do it with an IV. It's not fun, but I felt great for about 2 weeks after. Here's a trippy thing.
What's it do?
So it's a coenzyme, and we all have it. And by the time I think the average person's 40, you have about half of it that you had when you were young.
Okay.
and it has to do with energy production in the mitochondria. It has to do with like ATP and ADP, and how everything needs it in your body to live. If you took out NAD plus, like, you would die very shortly after. Um, the pros and cons are everything feeds on it, even
Okay.
cancer, everything does. And so if someone's going through cancer, or someone, has something like that, not all cancers, but some's more tumor, that is something to be cautious of. But aside from that I'm aware of, and obviously, if anyone's listening to this, I'm not a doctor, so please do your own research. This is not a recommendation, just talking about my own journey. Is It is amazing for reducing increasing mental clarity, mental performance, memory. It reduces brain fog and increases energy. It speeds up DNA repair. It speeds up recovery from physical exercise, especially lifting weights. It slows your aging, and that has to be linked with your telomeres as well, I believe. It has all these amazing impacts. Helps your sleep, more endurance, more stamina, and yeah, it's just really amazing. And so I've been figuring out how to take it in a cost-effective way, because the IVs are ridiculous. They're like $600-700 a
Okay.
pop, and you have to get those at a pretty frequent rate. People do injections, but still, I'm like, it's just needles. I get IVs. I'm getting IVs again, just regular, like, vitamins, minerals, glutathione, antioxidants, and stuff. Needles aren't my favorite, but I'm used to them just because of my health and stuff, getting my blood drawn. But this is a way, it's a patch. It's really cool. So it's a medical device. And one of my friends that I met told me about it. She's looks way younger than she is. And it's a patch that has like a positive and a negative side. And the interesting thing about this, so it's a medical device because it actually kind of pumps, and I don't know the technology, but it pushes the NAD plus into your skin. And then there's ways you can test for your NAD levels, like intracellular NAD levels, and it increases that a lot to what you would want at like the age of 20.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna start that this week. I'm excited about that.
Interesting. You're starting that patch thing.
Tomorrow I get it. Yeah.
Word.
So they
Okay.
have to give you a prescription, and since NAD plus is very unstable in the sense of once it's like there and mixed, it degrades very quickly.
Okay.
And so there's like levels of how you can consume this to get it in your body. You have NAD plus, then you have NMN, then you have NR, and then you have vitamin B3. But B3 alone won't get you more NAD plus. NR doesn't have a lot of the benefits for NAD plus that NMN has. And then NMN is a supplement that is more stable, and you can take it in pill form. And there's a whole other thing like with resveratrol, which is in red wine. I was listening to this where if you take that, because I take that every day, but I only take 750 milligrams. There's a bunch of research out that says if you take 1,000 milligrams of NMN, which increases NAD plus, with 1,000 milligrams of resveratrol in the morning every day, it's like a bonkers synergistic effect on immune system and anti-aging. And so I'm going to be taking these patches right now because I can't find a reputable supplement for the NMN that I trust yet.
Got it.
So I might switch to that. That'd be more cost effective. But I just can't find anything that makes sense
Okay.
yet. And so I'm going to up my resveratrol tomorrow. Or actually today. I fixed that this morning. And then add the NAD plus patches tomorrow.
Okay.
And I'm really, really excited about that. There's so much more I can say about this.
Yeah.
But
How long's the patch supposed to last?
so you wear it for 14 hours.
Okay. So it's just like an onloading phase, like an onboarding phase to drug. It's not something that you continue to wear as it gives it to you. It's like takes 14 hours to administer whatever it's doing.
Yes. And it
And
takes
then
about
when do you do
two
it again?
weeks. Yeah, so it takes about 2 weeks to get when you if you load up, there's different ways to do it, but the simplest way this company recommends it is you wear the patch for 14 hours and then it stops pumping it into your system. And you do that. I'm gonna load, so I'm probably gonna do it twice in the first week. But the make once you get there, there's a lot of ways to get there based on timing. But the simplest maintenance way to do it is they give you 6 patches for a month,
Okay.
and so every 5 days you wear one for basically the whole day for 14 hours. And this is interesting too, and Tony Robbins talks about this. Our military, I believe, is using some altered or enhanced, some form, it has something to do with NAD plus to literally make super soldiers like stuff you see in Marvel. Um, and this has been going on for years.
Yeah,
And there's a name for it. It's like a series of numbers, some like weird sci-fi name for this. And it's in Tony Robbins' book, Life Force. So I don't remember what it's called, but there was a few things that stood out in the book. NAD plus was one. He was just going off on it, and it's becoming really big. The term Senolytics I learned from Tony Robbins' book, and this is interesting. So, I have to take a pill every day, and it's for a specific health leukemia that's I would never wish on my worst enemy. But here's what's also interesting. I didn't know that the chemo pill I have to take is a senolytic. And they're
it
doing
is a Senolytic.
research. Yeah. And I didn't never even thought about that. I just thought like it's like this toxic pill I have to take to keep me
Yeah.
alive. But Ficidin, so people know quercetin. Lance Armstrong made that supplement pretty popular because he would take it. Quercetin is a powerful antioxidant. And then Ficidin is mainly from fruits, I believe. Tony Robbins talks about Ficidin. It's also a powerful senolytic, and it's a powerful antioxidant. They're doing studies to administer the chemo pill that I have to take with Ficidin to people that don't even have leukemia,
Okay.
because it's such a powerful senolytic anti-aging combination. So they're even researching that. So I have, from like physical endurance to being able to show up and serve, to energy, to sleep, to not getting sick, to recovering better, to protecting my DNA, to aging slower, to reducing hair loss, to all these things. I've just been getting so fascinated by this stuff.
Yeah.
So NAD plus is one of my newest things.
That's really interesting, man. I think it's fascinating, all the research that's been going on it around it, and more on like the internal side. Obviously, there's external physical repercussions for a lot of these things that can be beneficial as far as just looking younger, or everything performing as if it were younger. And but I think the ability to reverse or halt some of the medical things we have going on in addition to our lives, like in your condition or situation, I think that's fascinating too, and has sparked probably a big significance around why you have been paying attention to these things and figuring that out. And that's really, I think it's fascinating because it reminds me of something that can be really healthy, potentially to everybody who participates with it. But our modality or our reason for being there, our reason for wanting it, can be so varied. And I feel like it's just interesting. Not a right or wrong, scenario, but from somebody who is in relatively peak physical health, just desiring to stay in that condition longer, or even if there's a way to step up where they're already at, in that. Obviously, there's the people trying to overcome things in their life that have physically set them back, and then
Yeah.
a massive myriad in between there. And I'm always interested because the more we've seen working with energy, working with uh, emotions and hormones, and more spiritual side of things, or just calling it spiritual for lack of a better way of really describing, like, just the incredible importance of the energy fields that we
Mm.
possess and are and run on and connect with,
Yeah.
and the dramatic effect that our beliefs or our participation with that energy have on the physical world. The
Mm.
supplements we take, the activities we do, like whether that be
Mm-hmm.
working out or actual drugs or supplements, like all those things have a different effect based on the host body that they're coming into, based on the energy that's there, the belief systems.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting too, in conjunction with this. Obviously, not a scientist, not a doctor either, but I'm so curious to the implications of administering these different things to just people in a different life scenarios, just different mindsets, just people that are doing it back to the, or not, maybe not back to, but introducing the idea of move toward or move away from energy that we love to talk about.
Mm.
As somebody taking this because they're running from something that's happened to him,
Mm.
fear based,
Yeah.
scarcity based, is someone
Mm.
participating with it because they're desiring more of what their body's already creating, excited about that,
Amen.
building on that, reproducing that, you know, kind of stepping into making exponential. So what already is positive, it feels
Mm-hmm.
like those different energies can really transform what it is you're taking. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's one of the fascinating things about a lot of the research being done. Um, I know Tony Robbins has done an immense amount of research into this
Oh yeah.
field and put a significant amount of money towards that research. It's happening outside of pharmaceutical companies. It's happening outside of a third party or a drug system that would have uh, they would get money back from that research they're doing, that have, I would just say, more all are ulterior motives or more questionable, like where their research and data is
Mm.
coming from, based on also selling a product or manufacturing a product. So it's
Yeah.
really interesting seeing some movers and shakers and people with great affluence and wealth, Tony Robbins being one of those, interested in these things and doing their own independent research. And I know that's coming from a mindset of abundance. That's coming from a mindset of, like, how can this be better?
Yep.
I've already achieved amazing things. How can we tap into that and continuing to kind of push that forward? And I think that's really valuable. That's a
Mm.
really valuable alternate voice to hearing about these things from an idea of scarcity, or from our ideas, or of the human body just being broken and falling apart and
Mm.
collapsing, and you know waste and nutrition and all that. So that's things that just kind of come up in my mind as you're talking about it, because
Yeah.
that's a I feel a very big departure from historically where this has been. I think those with money and affluence historically have always been the ones that have been participating in trying to find these things and use
Mm-hmm.
things that help promote youth and energy and vitality, those things. But it's a relatively new thing, I feel like, that we can actually participate in the studying of those and the creation of those, and that's
Mm.
starting to happen in a really neat way. um
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. It's like what's driving what we're doing is
mhm,
such a good thing to be aware of, that we are usually pretty hyper aware of, I think, as people beyond the human norm because of our backgrounds and just we've
mhm,
been through. And I think, yeah, it's something too which was actually linked to this whole topic is, TRT therapy,
mhm.
testosterone
Yeah.
replacement therapy, TRT. And Joe Rogan talked about it. All these people are talking about it. The guy who plays Reacher, he's become kind of famous on that TV show. He's, I don't know, 40s or 50s. It's a game changer. And it's like, well, if your TRT is in a good healthy range, like, and you decide to use it, like, well, that might be a move away from potentially. I don't know, but I think it's like, there's things we can do, right? There's Senolytics, there's, hormones, there's all these things of like, hey, getting your blood tested and like taking responsible action, and like, why are we doing it? And even Joe Rogan talked about it. Like, if you're a doctor and you haven't talked about your sleep, your diet, your physical activity, your stress levels, and you're getting like a full comprehensive blood work done, which most primary care physicians won't do because insurance won't cover it. And that's a whole another part of the healthcare system that I'm not a fan of, which is why I work outside of it. And my doctor, I don't even go through insurance. I know not everyone can afford that, so there's ways you can bring stuff up with your primary care, to get them to do it and kind of play that insurance game. But I support that because I think insurance should pay for it. Because if you're not looking under the hood, so to speak, and you don't know your blood, to me, that's irresponsible from a doctor's perspective if you're trying to make these changes. And so I think it needs to be holistic. It needs to be responsible. You need to look under the hood and get the blood work done. Then when you have that, taking responsibility, like, why do I want to do this? How disciplined and what action am I taking? Like, how am I really already showing up to where I built a foundation? I think it's the same thing for psychedelics, right? I'm just going to try to get a quick fix, or do I have the habits? Do I meditate? Do I work out? Do I do these things? And if that's there and we're looking for more because we're putting the work in and we're showing up, then it gets really interesting. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not just like, yay, let's take all this stuff and just hope that, like, whatever. I think that's a very good point. And if that's there, I think the sky's the limit. And I think that's my approach. I get my blood work done every 3 to 4 months, and I had a personal record on deadlift last week, which is a massive win for me. And I'm putting in the work, and it's like, cool, what are these other things I can learn?
Yeah.
So I can continue to put the work in. I can continue to show up and feel good in my body, in my mind, in my heart, in my energy. And that's aligned with my spiritual health. And then just show up better for the world. And if it also helps me just feel better and can increase confidence that's dependent on my discipline, and I can afford it, why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
And so I think I'm really glad you brought that up. I think that's a really important point.
I love what you were saying too. It's just like the perspective piece on it and the usefulness of it based on where it's coming from as well. Like these are higher level things that are amazing to assist somebody who's doing the fundamentals and push forward.
Yeah.
But almost like everything else in life, there's not a silver bullet. Like there's a lot of these things, and I think that's how they show up in the media a lot, is like somebody looking for this thing so I don't have to exercise, so I like don't have to monitor what I eat, so I don't have to go to bed at a regular time, so I don't have to get enough sleep, so I don't have to get natural sunlight, so I don't, like these all these things we're trying to escape. And it's like, no, these things are actually useful on top of a healthy program, on top of a healthy diet. When you are getting the appropriate amount of fitness, sleep, exercise, relationships, or health, because like all those things affect, adding these things in can be big shifters. They can be big changers, but there's a huge potential that they do nothing, or even harmful in some way to you if things aren't ready. Even if they're only harmful in the fact that you're putting forth effort, money, and excitement towards something that's not actually going to work because there's no legs under it. You haven't built the framework for this building to exist. I think that has a potential of being almost a depressant. Like that can lead somebody into more hopelessness because they continue to try to build this, structure without a foundation. It's just like that doesn't work in any area. And But I feel like in modern science, in modern America, with the amount of research we have available, the amount of advertisements we are subjective to, and the amount of actually just affluent people trying different things and being like, hey, check this out.
Yeah.
For $50,000, like I felt a whole lot better for a couple weeks. Most of us don't have the opportunity to try that,
Yeah.
but it becomes something that we hold out, in our mind of like, oh, I would be healthy if, um,
Mm.
and we actually had this conversation recently because I'm starting to take better care of my body and getting my blood work done and stuff, and that was one of the absolute first things that my doctor said to me. He's like, we can add all these other things, but until you're actually eating appropriately and exercising, like that was the biggest piece that was just inconsistent with my life.
Yes.
I get
Yes.
outdoor a lot, but it's not a habit. It's not a
Mm.
daily routine that the outdoors is happening on top of. It's like I was trying to use that infrequently a couple times a week to be, to make up for everything. Um, and he was just, leading me back to those building blocks. It's like all of this stuff like is relatively pointless unless you're paying attention to what's going in your body and you're working out. It's like
Yeah.
without the diet and the exercise, it's like the rest of it is really, um, it's the 5 or 10% when the diet and the exercise is the 80-90%. He's like,
Yeah.
that's
The
the
80/20 rule
piece.
for health.
He's like, that you've got to be doing that piece. This other stuff
Yeah.
is like, it'll help, but it's so negligible if you're not doing those other things. They're big improvements if you have the foundation. If you
Yes.
don't,
Yes.
it's probably not noticeable what it'll shift.
Yeah.
Which I think that's really interesting. And I think that's you know, we talk about this a lot, like that idea plays out in our lives in a bunch of other areas and a bunch of other scenarios, and I think it's really useful to remember the importance of the healthy habits, man, the importance of the day in, the day out, and not the sexy parts. Like that's not the we talk about this a lot. Like that's not the fun part. Um,
Yeah.
I was trying to remember what somebody said recently. It was in a finance course, but um, people being attracted to the gain somebody has, not the effort it took to get there. Like wanting
Yeah.
wanting their results, not their procedure. Like,
Yep.
and I think that's fascinating. That's really easy to miss. When we go
Mm.
buy a book, go online, you see a course, and you're like, watch this person, and you're like, this is what they did to reach their millions or whatever their financial success was. And we take a 10-week course, and it's not that you can't learn some of those principles, but realizing like that this person has been running this program for years at this point. Like they've put so much time and effort into these habits. It's not just doing these habits. It's like you have a habit of doing these habits. Like this is your lifestyle. This is how
Yes.
you show up.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a process to any success. Um, and I think it's incredibly human to desire the rewards of that without wanting to do the process. It's just ridiculous that we think we can actually make that jump.
Yeah.
Um, that we can ever participate in that glory without taking those specific steps over and over and over and over and over. I absolutely get caught in that myself. And consistently drawn toward, things that are selling their results, with just a little bit of process. It's just like that. Just a little bit of process is going to get you just a little bit of results. Like it's like
Yeah.
what goes in, it has to be there for what comes out. And
I completely agree with that, man.
hmm,
I think I agree with that so well, and it's well, several things. Like the first thing is, yeah, I think I love like what you mentioned about the blood work and the foundation and working with your doctor, and I just think for anybody, like, and it's not just physical, it's not just aging. Like even in what I do professionally, we're pushing this a lot more now. is whether you have a mental condition or stressor or lack of fulfillment, whether you have an emotional situation, condition, or lack of fulfillment, whether you have a physical, etc., it's like it feels more and more irresponsible now. And even what I do professionally, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I help people on very deep levels. And it's like, well, get your blood drawn. Let's look under the hood and make sure that everything I'm going to do for you and basically hold space and help you do for yourself, essentially, is the best value, the most appropriate, and targeted in the right way. So we're not barking up the wrong tree. And so I really have to touch back on that because I think it's so important. And it's blood work and modern science, especially in our country, is we have access to so much. And especially if you work with a naturopathic doctor or an integrative doctor, integrative medicine, PCPs, there's a lot of them and they serve a lot of people. And I know how they are traditionally trained allopathically. And so for emergencies and certain things and medication, they serve a really good purpose, surgeries and stuff like that. But when it comes to like mental, emotional, chronic conditions or like consistent health and abundance and vitality, they are not the heavy hitters in that realm. And so there's a lot of other options is what I'm saying. And naturopaths or integrative doctors, different kinds of people, they can get you really good blood work for not a lot of money and just start there. And then it's like, let's then see, okay, like, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And that's where like hormones or all these things, and like you go from there. And so then I think back to other parts you were saying, which were so amazing, is then all the
What did you just see? Eagle?
hawk.
Nice.
This is only the third time I've ever seen
I'm
a hawk
imagining
here.
the big window in front of you.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. Huh. Yeah, anyone who's watching this, who's heard me talk about the hawk story, that might be the hawk, and this is just the third time it's come, and someone else I'm here with in the last 7 years. That's really cool. Yeah, totally got me. I'm like, oh, hawk. Speaking of energy and like spiritual stuff, it like totally pulled me in. Yeah, you made some really good points, and I think it is a very empowering approach to life. And I think that it's empowering in the sense that once we start to understand that so much of our like what we seek as humans to better our lives stems from how we feel in our body, in our state, in our mind, in our heart. And then you get your blood work squared away and you start doing, it's like, well, why do I want more money? Why do I want this relationship? Why do I want more sex or a better car? Or I want to XYZ. Get that handled, and then it gets fun. Then you get that self-discipline, you get self-esteem, self-respect, you get results, you get this, and you realize what we've talked about many times is what you just said, like the process. It's all the greats talk about this. And, you see people want the end result. And it's like, man, like, you just, even if you got that, you couldn't maintain it because you're not the person that had to become the person to get it. And that's the real joy. And so I think kind of bringing it all together, I think that's where all of the types of health that a human can experience, they all converge there. Blood work and discipline and love the process. Fall in love with what you have to sacrifice for the process. Fall in love with what you had to give to earn really cool. The results.
Thanks for letting us in on a bit more of your health journey. And it's so interesting how that's that aspect of health and benefits built on top of just good habits or whatever. It really is something that I think we can start exploring as the average human in a much more significant way now. I'm excited to see where that goes, and looking forward to actually hearing back about what you're doing as well. and any change or shifts you experience from that. So thanks
Right on,
again.
man. Thank you. 111. Be well.